My name is Rhiannon Adam, and I'm going to tell you a story, because I believe that stories are the way that we can shape our future. I think that they are the most important element about what it means to be human. So who am I? Well, first off, I'm an artist. I specialize in kind of working with photography and archive material. I make very long-term projects, usually. I'm a woman. I am queer. This is my favorite kids' book of all time. I started my existential crisis very, very early, as you can see. So I was born in County Cork in Ireland, and Ireland has never sent anyone to space. So that's also a fact that you should remember. And then when I was 7 years old, my parents, my mum and my dad, we bought a boat, a 42-foot boat, and we decided to sail around the world. And it was just the three of us. So I didn't actually start school until I was a teenager, when my aunt decided to take in this wayward kid and allow me to move to London with her. So I have no background in science. I have no astronaut training in the traditional sense. I was not on this kind of collision course to find my way into space. That was never my grand plan. And in fact, I could never imagine someone like me would have ever found this opportunity. I was never a space obsessive, even. I used to look at the night sky, and I would look up and realize my own tiny infinitesimal smallness, but beyond that, that was kind of my connection with space. So I also just about make ends meet every month as an artist. I don't go to a gym. So I'm telling you all these things because under normal circumstances, each one of those things would preclude me from going to space. But together, they kind of make me a bit of a unicorn. So all my life changed very, very suddenly at the end of 2021, when I was selected to go to space. And not just space, because I know that there are a lot of short hop flights that go up and come back down, but I was selected to go to the moon. And to give you a little bit of context, there have been 117 billion humans on this Earth that have ever lived, and only these guys, which is 24 white American men, they're the only people that have ever been around the moon or landed on the moon. That is it. So we are talking an infinitesimally small number of humans that have traveled there. And the last time that we went to the moon was actually in 1972. So we haven't been back in my lifetime. So 238,000 miles away. I mean, that is the furthest that humans have ever traveled. And then since 1972, the actual most recent kind of foray into distant space travel was actually 870 miles, which was the Polaris Dawn mission in 2024. And that is the furthest that we have traveled in kind of recent history. The ISS, to give you some context, which is where almost every astronaut that we see going to space, that is 254 miles away, which is about the distance between Tallinn and Stockholm. So how did I find myself in this utterly bizarre position? It was 2021, in the middle of the pandemic, and I was having what you might call an existential crisis. I was sitting in the flat in London, and I was thinking, well, most of my work, it deals with humans, traveling, with social distancing and no travel. I mean, I just felt like my life was over. So I was really, thinking, what the hell am I going to do? And then, as if by some sort of moment of divine intervention, a friend of mine sent me an opportunity. And I'd been kind of thinking, like, I don't know, maybe I'll just go and be an accountant or something. I don't know, something I can do from the kitchen table. I don't know, maybe I'll learn to be a journalist. Oh, no, that's not a very good idea either, because that might involve humans. And all of my work, it really focuses on this idea, this fine line between utopia and dystopia. And I'm really interested in this idea of like where things really go wrong and when a utopia turns into a dystopia and how close those two things are, actually. And most of my work, it's kind of dealing with very intense communities in close quarters. So when this opportunity came up, I thought, maybe not such a bad idea. And that opportunity was the dearMoon project. It was a trip on this rocket to go around the moon to retrace the steps of Apollo 8, which was the first lunar circumnavigation that happened in 1968 and took 3 astronauts to space. So that was the kind of plan, and what was more incredible about it was that it was to take artists. And it was funded by a Japanese billionaire called Yusaku Maezawa. And in 2018, he bought all of the seats on this rocket. So it was going to be completely refitted and kitted out for artists alone. And this is SpaceX's forthcoming mega rocket, which is Starship, which I'm sure you've seen a fair few launches. And this is the rocket that's eventually going to be taking humans to Mars. So this felt like a first step in this new kind of foray into the new space age. And so I thought to myself, well, if I can't make work on this planet, I might as well try and leave it. So it was going to be a week-long flight, literally copying the flight path of Apollo 8 and doing a lunar loop-the-loop and coming back. And it's just about long enough for you to think about your own existential crisis all over again in a different location, but also long enough to be able to make work and be able to make something that really mattered. And what was incredible about this is that, for the first time, this felt like a billionaire was really putting his kind of money where his mouth is. So the idea was that we were going to be making work that we could bring back to inspire world peace in some way. And that sounds very, very lofty as an ambition. But there is actually already a precedent set. We have seen evidence that art can change the world. Because, Apollo 8, as the first crewed mission, they took a very famous image that many of you are familiar with. And even though this first mission, it was kind of an extension of the war effort, in essence. Apollo 8 was going to the moon to kind of scout around for lunar landing sites. And then, of course, that was during the Cold War, so it meant that Apollo 8 was part of the war effort about establishing American superiority and deciding which ideology should win in the Cold War. So while we have this kind of romantic notion of space, actually, a lot of it originates in kind of a military takeover. But so this is a kind of key moment in human history. But this is Command Module pilot Bill Anders. He was one of the 3 crew on Apollo 8, and he's there with his adapted Hasselblad 500. As this single exposure, which we know as Earthrise, it really changed the way that we think and feel about ourselves and each other. Although this image, it was not the first time that we'd actually seen an image of the whole Earth. It was the first time that one of those images had been made by the human hand. And it was that kind of dose of humanity and the story of taking it, that was what made this image so incredible. And in a way, it ended up sparking so many things. After this followed the formation of Greenpeace, Doctors Without Borders. So many things changed, and millions of lives were actually saved. And this was an accidental add-on to the Apollo 8 mission, but it was perhaps its most enduring legacy. So when Yusaku Maezawa announced that he would send artists to space, it felt like a gift. It felt like a gift to humanity and a way of kind of, the saying when if you give a man a fish, it will feed him for a day, or you give him a fishing rod and he can feed himself for a lifetime? Well, this is what it felt like. It felt like by giving artists that power to be able to make work and to contemplate and to think really deeply about their own place in the world, this was kind of passing it on and creating this snowball effect. So this was really recognizing the need for imagination on the same plane as innovation. And then, as Anders himself once said, that we should have sent poets because we could not understand the grandeur of what we had seen and what we had felt. And then this kind of sentiment had been echoed by almost every astronaut that has been and experienced the overview effect. They have gone up there and they have said all the same things over and over and over, and yet we still have not sent artists to space. We've still not sent anyone who has the luxury of just being able to concentrate fully on making work and contemplating their own humanity. We have never yet done that. And I think this was a bit of a rallying cry, the Apollo 8 quote. That was a rallying cry, and it's something that we still have not answered all these years later. But here it was, this opportunity to make that change. And this is an incredible quote from Story Musgrave, that saying that the thing that is missing from the heart and soul of the space program is actually this idea of humanity, that you have this responsibility to kind of go out there and translate that experience. So why not send professional translators? So when applications opened for the dearMoon project, 1 million people applied. It was intimidating. I mean, normally I'm applying for artist grants, and that feels bad enough when you're competing against 5,000 people. But this was slightly more intimidating. So I didn't think there was any chance in high hell that I was going to make it through this selection process. But, I'm used to kind of having my rejection inbox filled. So I thought, well, why not? What's one more rejection, hey? Develop a thick skin as an artist. So But I did think, I'm kind of mentally prepared. I did grow up on a boat, which is a steel capsule of its own in the middle of nothing. I had survived on canned food. I had lived in close quarters with my parents, both of whom at some point I wanted to kill, and they wanted to kill each other, and somehow we are all still alive, so I figured that that made me in quite a good position to deal with fellow crew. And of course, I dealt with other people's bodily functions in close quarters. So I remember the call very clearly. I was in Tel Aviv. I was prepping to go on a stage like this one, and it was the culmination of 7 years of work on my last project, Big Fence. It was the first time I was going to hold this book in my hands. And I got an email, another email. And I thought, oh, no, not one more. Like, really? I've been going through this process for about 8 months by this point, and I thought, and they kept on sending us things saying, can you join this call? And it would be sort of 4 a.m., and you'd go, yes, I'll jump, because you've said jump. But I said, okay, sure. And then within a few minutes, I ended up on this video call with Yusaku Maezawa, just there. And it was just him on the screen for the first time. It was just him alone. And he said to me, would you like to come to space with me? And I said, yeah. I mean, I kind of cried, laughed, made some sort of noise resembling a yes, because he seemed to nod, and that seemed to be okay. And yeah, and then when I left the room, I had to walk out, get myself together, go on stage, and I felt like I was giving this talk about what already felt like my past life while I was walking into this completely uncertain future. So I wasn't drawn to this project because it was cool. I mean, it was cool, but that wasn't really my motivation. It was helping my life crisis, but it was also continuing the work that I love to make. But I also believe that space is our connective tissue. It's the way that we connect with our ancestors. It is our collective past. From the earliest cave paintings to this piece of art, which is, thousands of years old, we have always looked at the stars and we've asked ourselves really the same questions. Who are we? Where are we going? Who else is out there? So we were actually born from stardust. We're made of atoms that originated with stars, and every single time that we look out into space, we're actually looking into the past. It's our form of time travel. The light that reaches us, it began its journey thousands of years ago, before we were even a twinkling in our parents' eyes. So really, this is our connective tissue, and is where we will return to. So while scientists have been pushing the envelope forward, I was reminded, because of the pandemic, of how important the arts were. Because while scientists had been working on the vaccine in order to give us back our freedom, it was the arts where we had sought our kind of respite. That's where we kept our imaginations going. That's where we found ourselves having some sense of freedom. And it felt like the arts and sciences, they were in conversation with one another. They weren't two distinct entities. And we needed to keep that conversation going. I came to realize, too, that after my selection, I started to read films, watch films, read books. I was obsessed with anything to do with space, and the more I was searching, the more I found two things. Number one, there were very few people like me represented in those narratives. And number two, that actually the artists of the past are writing the present. So many things have been invented in the pages of books that have come to pass. When you're looking at a geostationary satellite, that was first conceived of in a book. Jules Verne first wrote about launching a rocket from Florida before NASA was even thought about. So these things are the recipe book for our present. So for 3 years, dearMoon completely and utterly consumed me. It was every waking thought. When I went to sleep, I just dreamt of it nonstop. It defined who I was. It took the air out of every single room. I felt the symbolic weight of trying to represent everyone, actually. I looked up and dreamt of the stars, but I realized that you also have to write the future that you want to live. So I wanted to hold the door open for others. And so when the announcement happened, I decided that I was going to make it work, and I was going to introduce myself to the world in my truest form. As Sally Ride said, echoing Mackenzie's talk, you cannot be what you cannot see. And astronauts, they just don't look like me. I'm messy, and I'm flawed, and I'm imperfect. And I tried to fit that hero mold, but it just wasn't me. And I felt that as time went on, I was actually almost losing that part of myself that made me unique, the part that made my perspective worth having. Being queer taught me that existence itself, in its very essence, was an act of rebellion. And then the dearMoon story, it touched so many people. There was Stuart, the local houseless man, who said to me that because I had been selected, it gave him hope that his luck could change too. And then there was Jean from South Padre Island, who gave me a piece of twisted, broken rocket after a beach cleanup mission, and it was very morbid, and I laughed. You know, he and Stuart had never met, but they were connected by the fact that I was the odd pick, actually. That I was unusual, and that then they saw themselves in me. And they were really the tip of the iceberg. I mean, these are just some of the many messages that I received during that time. But, you know, then tragedy struck. And dearMoon was cancelled last year in June. And it felt like the whole world was crumbling down. All the dreamers left high and dry, all the possibility to tell a different story gone in an instant, and the close of a chapter. And then just 6 days later, Bill Anders, who once said they should have sent poets, he died. And it felt like some kind of cosmic timing. And so when dearMoon ended, I felt guilty. I felt guilty for carrying all of these dreams so tightly. But I knew it wasn't my fault. But perhaps our crew had been a little bit naive. Perhaps we put too much faith in someone's word. But I didn't want our story just to be evidence that if you think that something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. So I decided to do something about it. As Apollo 9 astronaut said, Rusty Schweickart, who's amazing, and he basically said that you are the feeling, you are the reach out, you are the place where concept meets technology. You are there as the translator. And I wanted to continue that. So this is the piece of twisted rocket. It's now a kind of my monument to lost dreams. But it's often said that re-entry is the most dangerous part of any man's spaceflight. And it's true, my psychological re-entry has been the most difficult part of all of this. But perhaps there can be some kind of redemption, where these moments are somehow catalyzed in all of you, where you can imagine yourself that you can write the future. You need to write the stories now that will help us live a different reality. So I hope that when you all leave here, that you will leave with a feeling that spaceflight isn't just for someone else, that we actually have to write it and then it might come true. Like the science fiction books of the past, write different stories, work with artists, collaborate. We can build a different and better future. So like Icarus, maybe I flew too close to the sun, and maybe my wings melted, but maybe actually falling back to Earth was a story of redemption, of transformation. And maybe I can pass on a little bit of this to you too. Space is a place of both danger and extreme possibility. It is all of ours. We are already in it. Don't forget that. We are in space right now. So in 1667's Paradise Lost, there's this diagram about chaos and heaven. And both of those things, I think, are just intermingled right now. And we have an opportunity to decide which pathway we're going to go down, which way it's going to go. I firmly believe that in the next 10 to 15 years, that we're going to be protesting about what is happening in space with the same fervor as what we are with climate change. And we need to care. It isn't just from the pages of fiction books. So perhaps this is why artists belong in space. We need to tell different stories. We need to reach out. We need to connect back. We need to make you feel empowered to change the future for the better. I may never have left the Earth's orbit, but in some ways I felt that I embodied the overview effect, because I felt like I'd already been there, actually. I felt that I was already there, even though I never left. So close your eyes for a minute and just imagine what you would say to the people back on Earth if you were to be given that opportunity. What would you say? What would the message be that you wish to send back? And what is the future that you wish to write? Who gets to dream? Who gets to write the future? Is it you? I hope so. So we can send artists and scientists to space. They are both equally important. Diverse perspectives will expand our understanding. Exploration without interpretation is simply just distance traveled. Because Bill Anders was right all along, and they should have sent poets. Thank you all for listening.